My dad's on safari in Africa, and he sent a photograph through, and Harry, my son, I said, look at the trees, they look really African, don't they? He went, yeah, they're acacia trees. And I said, how do you know that?
That's brilliant.
And he went, we have them on Minecraft.
It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from Beyond the Classroom with Marie and Jodie.
So this week we're discussing outdoor education, and specifically how this can be enhanced by mobile phones, which is not something you might think of as a naturally symbiotic relationship. No. We're joined by Jack Reed, a PhD candidate at the University of Edinburgh. His research explores mobile technologies and social media in residential outdoor education at the Outward Bound Trust. Jack is interested in young people's experiences of education and how these experiences are filtered through online connected spaces, and how these networked environments inform contemporary youth cultures.
So here with Jack, we also have Emily Wormold. Emily works for the Outward Bound Trust. She started out as an instructor, taking young people out of their comfort zones and challenging them to go beyond in the mountains and the lakes of the Lake District. She continues that work as the Trust's Northern Education Account Manager, working alongside schools, colleges and youth groups, helping them to organise their residentials. Welcome, Jack and Emily.
Indeed.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fantastic to see you all.
Nice to see you too.
Yes, absolute pleasure to have you.
Emily, can you tell us a bit about Outward Bound?
Yeah, so Outward Bound's an educational charity working with young people to offer adventure and learning in the wild. We were founded in 1941, so kind of in the Second World War, focusing on training up young seamen and the skills they needed to survive kind of harsh conditions at sea, teaching them confidence, tenacity and perseverance. Obviously, we've come a long way since 1941, but the principles still remain. So we give young people the opportunities to develop skills that will set them up for success in their lives and inspire them to believe that they're capable of more than they think that they ever thought possible. And it's all founded on Kurt Hahn's principles, getting young people to believe they're capable of more than they think. So we have 6 centres around the UK, in the Highlands of Scotland, Lake District and Snowdonia, and our courses centre learning through adventure, taking young people into the mountains, onto the water and developing things like confidence, resilience, self-belief, and it sets them up with the skills that they need to tackle the real world head on, believing in themselves.
Jack, how did your research with Outward Bound come about?
Yeah, so it came about quite a long time ago now, or at least it feels that way. I first came across the PhD in 2019. It was an advertised PhD. So it's a collaborative PhD between the Outward Bound Trust and between the University of Edinburgh. So from the very outset, the topic has been set, really. And that topic was always to explore how young people's experiences of Outward Bound in these modern times are influenced by mobile technologies, but also by things like social media and so on. So it was a kind of a designed PhD, I suppose, which has been really nice. So I was able to kind of come in. I started in October 2020, just as we were about to go into another lockdown. And yeah, I spent 12 months designing the research and working very closely with senior leaders and instructors within Outward Bound itself, and created or designed a kind of research approach that I think, well, first of all, was incredibly exciting. I spent quite a few weeks at different Outward Bound centres, climbing mountains, canoeing across lakes, and yes, it was fantastic. And I'm now at the stage where I'm trying to write a thesis. So I've got all of my data, I've done the analysis, and so yeah, kind of at the stage, this exciting stage of being able to come and talk to people like yourselves about what I've discussed and what I found. So yeah, that's kind of the journey so far. At least
sounds really interesting. So as usual, we have some comments from listeners on this topic. So we're going to go to the first one, which is from a Year 6 teacher. We always run a residential Outward Bound trip in Year 6. It's a great opportunity for children to take risks and move outside of their comfort zones. A lot of the risks that young people take nowadays are not necessarily physical, so being willing to become braver and more resilient through physical tasks is a great way to prepare them for the transition to secondary.
So, what kind of are the benefits from your guys' point of view about outdoor education for young people? Why is it so important?
So one of the brilliant things about Outward Bound is that we've got kind of a designated in-house evaluation team,
Oh,
which means that we have all these wonderful things happening in the mountains and on the lakes, but
Yeah.
also a team that sit there and evaluate the courses. So we get young people involved kind of pre and post course, or
Oh,
we have
brill.
projects longer term of getting in touch with schools and teachers and young people
right.
kind of
Right.
6
So they
months
don't
after,
just
12
turn up,
months
do it,
Yeah.
after.
and go home. It's sort of,
Yeah. So it's kind of that full
yeah.
picture. And obviously for us, it means that we have a really good understanding about what works for our courses and how the courses impact young people on a long-term basis. And obviously that really helps with
Mm,
funding and everything else. So definitely in terms of Outward Bound, our latest report um, showed that our courses are really successful at enabling young people to develop confidence and social skills and helping them to reconnect with their peers and interact and know how to speak
mm,
with one another and work together again post COVID. After, obviously, for the couple of years of COVID,
Yeah.
they didn't work with
exactly. Yeah.
with their peers. They didn't work in teams. So we know that kind of outdoor education is really important for that, and it gives them the opportunity to learn about resilience and tackling that fear of failure. So they're trying things and activities and new things, and in a really safe environment where if they fail, if
Yeah.
they can't get to the top of that mountain, or they forget their gloves, or um, get a bit cold and hungry, then it is a obviously while challenging, but also a really safe environment
Yeah.
to fail, because then they'll
Yeah.
work with their team to come back to it and think, right, how can we improve on that tomorrow when we're going out again and doing this other activity?
Yeah.
um, and then we know that that really helps when they're back in school. They've had practice of trying something difficult, having challenges along the way, and then getting to the end of it and seeing what they've achieved. And then we know that that really helps them when they're facing kind of we talk about real mountains
Mm,
in the Lake District. In
Yeah.
Snowdonia, they're standing at the bottom of this massive mountain, looking up at it with their big heavy backpack, thinking, how on earth am I
yeah.
going to climb this
Yeah.
mountain? And at the end, they look back and they look down from the top and think of all these things that they've done that help themselves and their peers and their
Yeah.
friends to get to the top of that mountain. And then we transfer that back to
Yeah.
life back at school, what the metaphorical
That's
mountains that they're going
amazing.
to face when they're back at high school, looking at those mock assessments or
Yeah.
GCSEs or
And I think, like you
challenging.
say, people are so keen to get outdoors more since
Mm,
COVID. Like, I know I run the local junior rowing club, and our numbers have gone from 2 to 32 since
wow.
COVID. Like, it's just because people are so keen to be outside and doing stuff. And yeah,
Yeah, I think
it's.
it really ties in with that kind of mental
Mm,
well-being and mental
Mm,
health as well. There's such an agenda of getting young people outside and
yeah.
challenging themselves or trying new things, and that's such a well, it was something that was completely lacking for 2 years
that's right. Yeah.
during the
Yeah,
pandemic.
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I think there's probably something in there as well around actually connecting to nature as well. You know,
Mm,
in school environments, we know that outdoor play spaces are being sort of drastically reduced actually on school
Yeah.
campuses, and so having the opportunity to come out and experience nature
yeah.
in the Lake District or in the Highlands of Scotland, I think that's really important, especially given we are in a climate and ecological crisis, and I think that
Mm,
having that direct connection and being able to sort of generate your senses and feel and touch and smell nature,
Mm,
that's I think
yeah.
that connection is really
yeah.
important. But I think the outdoors is also a fantastic way of bringing learning to life. I haven't come across a topic that you can't
Mm-hmm.
teach outdoors, whether it
Mm,
be history or geography or
Yep.
science. All sorts of different
yeah.
fields can be educated through the outdoors. And so I think certainly when it comes to organizations like Outward Bound, but also just
Mm,
educating outside more broadly, it absolutely just brings
Yeah.
learning to life,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Which I think is
absolutely.
really
Yeah.
Yeah.
important.
It's just nice to breathe the fresh air sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have another comment from a listener to share with you. This one is from a parent to a student who's just returned from an outdoor residential. My daughter recently went on an activity residential with her school. She wasn't allowed to take her phone, which she was quite nervous about, but with hindsight, it was by far the best thing. She had a fantastic time, and the lack of communication with home meant that she could really throw herself into all the activities. The whole experience has really grown her confidence.
So, Jack, traditionally, schools have tried to keep mobile technologies both out of the classroom and away from residential trips. Do you think they're fighting a losing battle? But is this a battle they need to have?
That's an interesting question, isn't it? And I mean, I can only speak from my experience in the outdoors, which is very different, I'm sure, to having 30 young people in a
Yeah.
classroom or trying to go on TikTok. I'm
Of
sure
course.
that must be very different. But I am really interested in this idea of it kind of being a battle, and certainly some of the data that I've generated has actually kind of looked at ways that mobile technologies and social media and broader spaces like gaming on Minecraft, or Netflix, for instance, are actually generating an opportunity for young people to talk about some of this stuff. So I do have a couple of examples from my engagement with young people. The first was in Eryri National Park in northwestern Wales, and it was a super hot day, and we were out. We were going camping. We were going to go and climb a mountain, and we decided that we were going to camp just below the summit overnight, and then go and
Wow.
try and catch the
Oh,
sunrise
lovely.
in the morning. Which was
Brilliant.
amazing. It really was. But on the way there, we walked through a huge forest called the Diffie Forest. And for most of the young people who were there, this was the first time they'd seen this kind of environment. It really was incredible. The sun was coming through the trees.
Wow.
It was idyllic. And we paused for a water break, and the young people all of a sudden started collecting some sticks and were digging a hole over to the side of one of the tracks. And so I thought, with my sort of researcher hat on, I thought, well, there must be something going on here. So I went over and just asked a few questions. And as it turns out, they were digging for what they called the upside down. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
sure if you've come across the upside down
Yeah.
Yeah.
from Stranger Things. So, for any listeners who don't know what Stranger Things is, it's a Netflix series. I think there's 4 series now, and there's a
Yeah.
5th in production, where there's a kind of physical dimension that you would typically call normal life, and an alternate dimension that's beneath your feet that you can dig for. And beneath your feet is where all the bad things happen, and
Yeah.
so on. Would highly recommend watching.
It's brilliant. It's
Yeah, it
fantastic.
really is.
Scary for me.
Yeah, it is scary. It is
Terrifying.
scary. But for the young people, this was informing their imagination and informing the ways that they were engaging with nature. And so initially, I thought it was quite jovial, quite amusing, but it actually was quite serious. For these young people, this was the first time, like I said, that they were in this environment, and so there was a hint that the upside down could have been beneath their feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there is a character at the end of, I think it's series 3, and I won't do any spoiler alerts just in case anybody wants to listen, who dies in the series. And there was a call around digging for this person to see if they could find them. And so, like I say, there was an element of
Wow.
realism there, which was very interesting. And then the second one was actually around Minecraft. So the game Minecraft, where you can kind of build
Yeah.
environments and build a house and
Yeah.
so on. I'm sure most people are familiar with that. But I saw in the Lake District, actually, we were canoeing across Ullswater, and we were
Lovely
waiting
place.
for one of the steamers that goes up
Yeah.
and down in the
Yeah.
summer to dock. So we were sitting out in the middle of the lake. It was a beautiful day, and the instructor was describing some of the trees that we could see on the bank of Ullswater. And instead of it being an oak tree or an elm or whatever it might be, the young people straight away related that to Minecraft and
Oh,
about
wow.
how actually this was something that they could build a house
Yeah.
with, or something that was a fantastic building block for something else.
Oh,
And
wow.
so yeah, I guess that idea of it being a battle, or it maybe overlooks some of the nuance that I was
That's
seeing in
right.
terms of the
Yeah.
ways that young people are engaging in these online environments, certainly
Yeah.
learning
Yeah.
in these online environments, and then applying that almost, I suppose, a sense making baseline to interpret what they were seeing and thinking and
Yeah.
feeling. So yeah, that was kind of what I saw. But what I also saw was actually Outward Bound kind of constructing purposeful phone-free time
Yeah.
as a challenge, and is something that was part of the Outward Bound experience. And very often, young people were actually really keen to do that and to experience, often for the first time, 24 hours without their phone.
Yeah.
And there was, of course, a few people who were concerned about that. But again, it was about pushing that idea of being comfortable and trying to see what life might be like without a mobile phone. And so kind of flipping it on its head as well. Interestingly, with the Netflix example, the young people didn't have their phones
Oh wow. Yeah.
there. So even though their phones weren't present, it was still that kind of
Yeah.
online space informing their experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so
Mhm.
interesting that these pupils and students do not have the experience of not having a mobile phone. Because, like, if you're as old as I am,
Mhm.
I remember life before the internet. So, you know,
Yeah.
but they genuinely, they don't, obviously.
It's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, I was born in 1995, so almost at the turn of this kind of
Yeah.
internet
Yeah.
age. And I did have a phone-free early childhood, but not so much towards the end of my childhood, certainly. And that's something that I saw actually come through quite strongly at Outward Bound was young people really having a thirst to connect and connect with
Yeah.
home and friends. And one thing that came out quite prominently was
Yeah.
Snapchat streaks and needing
Maintain your
needing to
streak.
maintain the
Yes.
streak.
Yeah.
And that was a real source of
Mm.
anxiety for some young people.
Mhm.
Actually, was the fear of kind of losing that streak. And so yeah, that kind of 24-hour period. I guess that was what I was sort of referring to when some young people were maybe a little
Yeah.
bit unsure. Was actually
Yeah.
needing to walk them through quite carefully. Actually, this is what's going to kind of happen. This is why it's maybe beneficial, but critically, you will get
Of
your phone back
course.
at the end, and you will be able to
Yeah.
speak with your parents tonight.
Yeah.
And that element of comfort and safety was being sought
Of
through the
course.
phone.
Yeah.
Interestingly,
Yeah.
and I think post-COVID
Mm.
as well, where we know that young people have spent a lot more time at home and
Yeah.
so on. Very often the young people I was engaging with, it was the first time maybe ever that they had left their local town, but certainly
Yeah.
post-COVID. And so it was a big step to get on the bus on a
Of
Monday morning
course.
and go away for 5 days. And the
Yeah,
phones
absolutely.
facilitated
Yeah.
that sort of sense of
Yeah.
safety, I suppose.
Yeah. It's a totally different world that young people are growing up in now compared to even,
Absolutely.
us when it
Yeah.
wasn't that long
Yeah.
ago. Kind of,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
changed so
Yeah, and I
much in
think
the
we need
past
to
few years.
understand that when we're educating young people that this is the world they are used to. And so not
Mhm.
to maybe not to demonize the technology, but
Mm.
just use it and then also have periods of time when they don't have it so they can see what it's like to not have it. I
Yeah.
think that's really good.
It's your own time you're wasting. So why not stick the kettle on, put your feet up, and have a cuppa? Ah, bliss.
Okay, so let's just come to our final audience comment, which takes a little bit of a different tack. So here it is. When I was in year 9, about 30 years ago, we were all sent on a week-long trip which involved hiking, canoeing, abseiling, and all sorts of other adventurous activities. I should have been really excited, but basically I just remember being terrified because I had my period. The toilets were awful, the showers were communal, which is painfully embarrassing when you're a pubescent girl. While I think that outdoor activities are great for team building and personal growth, I think when you are a teenager, appropriate facilities are an important part of the mix, which often gets ignored. That's from a media studies teacher.
Mhm.
So, Emily, many students will have fears about going away on residentials for all sorts of reasons.
Mhm.
Do you think kind of allowing access to mobiles can help to alleviate these fears? Do you think there's other stuff we can do?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, and Jack's touched on it about how kind of mobile phones can be kind of a portable comfort zone for young
Yeah.
people. But I think one of my favorite, and I think one of the most powerful parts of an Outward Bound course is that on the first day of the course, it's really almost all courses start in our very traditional way of going for a jog and dip, and they sometimes
Nice.
very much kind of a plod and plop. Sometimes they're a longer run, but it's thinking about getting young people immersed in the
Yeah.
wilderness and into kind of the mindset of this being a learning opportunity as quickly as possible.
Mm.
And so it's really common that on a Monday of a start of a course, you'll see all these little groups of students down on the lake shore or the loch shore,
Mm.
in their circle of their team and talking about comfort zones. And often that will get drawn out in the sand or with a rope on the beach, and really thinking about kind of what's inside your comfort zones, the world that you're familiar with, the things you know and you do daily that you're
Yeah.
comfortable doing,
Yeah.
and then the things that will come this week that might be in that stretch zone. And the stretch zones are really important place to go to because that's where
Yeah.
learning happens. That's
Yeah.
new things, but actually to step into that stretch zone will feel like a stretch. And then there's the panic zone
Yeah.
beyond that, and actually really emphasizing to the young people that some things will be within their comfort zone. If someone's been in scouts all their life, then walking up a mountain, or if they go
Yeah.
on holiday
Yeah.
with their parents lot to the Lake District, then being on away for 5 days in the Lake District might actually already be within their
Yeah.
comfort zone.
Mm.
But for others, and it sounds like this kind of person that submitted in this kind of comment, actually just being away from home in a new environment,
Yeah.
in kind of a world they're not used to, is going to be outside
Yeah.
their comfort zone. And that's great, but how can we support people within that? And it starts a really nice conversation of how can the team around those people come together to build confidence of everyone, to support people, to encourage them where it's needed. And I mean, yeah, kind of our instructors are so brilliant at facilitating that. And then it kind of progresses on that everyone kind of goes into the lake to some amount that they're kind of stretched by. So for some people, that might just be putting their
Right.
toes in or going to their ankles. Other people might be jumping in off the
Yeah.
jetty. And that's fine that for different people, that level of challenge is going to be different and challenging for each individual personally. But I think it's really important that as leaders, as a trust, we really think about how young people feel coming to our centres and
Yeah.
how we can put things in place to make them feel
Yeah.
safe. And it's that
Of
hierarchy of needs,
course.
isn't it? Of no learning
Yeah.
is going to happen in
Yeah.
a positive way that we want it to unless people are
Yeah.
fed and watered and
Mm.
feel safe and comfortable in the environment they're in. So it's definitely something we obviously focus on so much, of making people feel
Yeah.
safe and comfortable in the situation they are in, so that they can
Yeah.
then take those steps.
Just to go back to the jog and dip, is that all year round? Because
Yeah, it's
I've swum in
amazing.
Ullswater in
Yeah.
October and it is cold.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a very traditional thing. Obviously, it started back in Wales when we were talking about kind of
Yeah.
people on boats surviving that cold water. But now it's very much a really immersive experience where they have to come together and cheer each other on. And
Yeah.
in January, when it's snowing outside and they're standing at the shore of the lake, it's madness, isn't it? To
Are
consider
we
going,
really going to do this?
but actually for everyone. Yeah, for everyone to stand there and do a little bit of kind of challenging
Yeah.
themselves, it just sets the tone amazingly for the next 5 days of the
Yeah.
Yeah.
course. And yeah,
And
in
also,
January, I see photos often, or I'm popped down to see one of my customers at the lake, and you see pictures of people jumping in January, and
wow.
young people are mad. They're
Yeah.
stronger than adults.
I was going to
Yeah.
say, when we went in October, my feet came off the ground, therefore I technically swam.
Yeah,
That was my rule.
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, as part of my research, I took part in 3 different jog and dips at the 3 different centres, and it was just incredible, actually. I mean, so I did go into Ullswater. This was in May, so maybe a little bit warmer than October. I'm not sure, but it was still
Yeah.
Baltic. I thought, at least. And there was a young person in the group who was really nervous, actually, about going into the water, and so we kind of, as a team, came around and just sort of walked this young person through it, and eventually he was able to come up to his knees, and his confidence was increasing a little bit, and then all of a sudden it was up to his hips, and after about 5 minutes he managed to submerge his
wow.
face,
Oh, wow.
which was
Yeah.
just amazing. And the power of that experience for that
Yeah.
young person was, well, yeah, you just almost can't put it into words, really. Sort of seeing the transformation even just through one activity. And I got speaking with him afterwards, just to say how fantastic that was.
Yeah.
And he said, and this will be in my thesis, he said, I saw an influencer do it, and so I felt like I could do it. And so he was telling this story of how before he came to Outward Bound, he was looking at some of the activities that are likely to be taking place. And he went on YouTube and he was looking at some of these experiences. And so it was that foundational experience of seeing the influencer that was one of the contributing factors to make him think, you know what, I can do this. So yeah, it was
That is
interesting to see.
That's really nice, because we recorded a podcast a while ago that was talking about influencers in kind of such a negative way, and kind of how they can be such a negative influence. So it's good to kind of know that there's a positive influence out there as well, and kind of and Ullswater obviously is just such a nice location. Talking about this is making me feel really jealous.
And it can be a really really powerful frame to the start of the course as well. So at Lochiela, our centre in the Scottish Highlands, you're there in the sea loch, so it's salty. It's obviously a very different environment to lots of young people are used to. But then also you can see Ben Nevis, you can see all these massive mountains around you, and you can stand there and right, actually we're going to climb over there this week. We're going to canoe from here down to here. We might camp over there. And it can be a really amazing foundational point for the week. And then it all builds on that. So remember that time where we cheered on each other to go a little bit further into the water, and it builds on the week and frames them their learning.
It sounds amazing.
Do some hard things that might make them a bit uncomfortable and cold. But actually, we're going to cheer each other on. We're going to try something new. And at the end of the day, we'll be back in the showers nice and warm in a bit. So it's only temporary suffering.
Right. Yeah, and then you'll feel amazing because you've done it.
Yeah.
I went to one place in the Lake District in Ullswater. I think it was on Ullswater, and it was just this really cool cliff you could jump off, and it wasn't even a cliff, it wasn't that high, but it was just so much fun. And the difference between my sister and I and my brother-in-law was amazing, because I had no problems doing it. My sister, it took herself some persuading, and there's no way that my brother-in-law was even going to think about doing it. It was hilarious.
I think one of my favourite moments when I was instructing with that on that Monday, trying to have a jog and dip, and young people being terrified of this water. It's such an unfamiliar environment for young people that aren't used to swimming, let alone in open water that's not a nice kind of chlorinated swimming pool. And so actually you have that major challenge at the beginning of the week, but then by the Friday they're really up for that challenge. They've grown that comfort zone, and so it's quite you'll see often on a Friday morning, in the lakes, young people doing a jog and dip again, or progressing it and going on a powerboat to probably those same cliffs you jumped off, Jodie, over to Kale Pot, the other side of the lake, and you can you can climb up onto a small ledge, and the biggest jumps are 1.5 meters. I stand at the top of it and feel pretty
it's quite big.
Big jump.
No, it's bigger than that, this one. I wonder where
but
it
what
was.
an amazing experience to go that full kind of learning at the beginning of the week to putting your toes in, your knees in, finding that challenging. But by the end, you're there, wetsuited up with helmets and buoyancy aid, and you're jumping in off a powerboat. What a brilliant progression of learning.
It's easy to see it, isn't it, happening in front of your eyes, when so much of learning in the classroom is more difficult to pin down sometimes.
Yeah, I was also interested in the feedback that you read out there, Marie, around the kind of facilities associated with outdoor education. And I think, was it 30 years ago that your listener had their experience around kind of being on her periods and the kind of communal showers and these kinds of things. And actually, that's, in terms of outdoor education in the present day, that absolutely isn't the case in terms of, those facilities are fundamentally different. But also, I was really interested in kind of thinking a little bit when I saw that comment and when I heard it just then around kind of normalizing some of these conversations around periods and these kinds of things. And I think that actually Outward Bound is an opportunity, if young people are kind of keen to pursue that, and if teachers are keen to pursue that, to actually normalize this and to know that you can wear a wetsuit on your period and these kinds of things. So
point.
Also around having those kinds of conversations. And there's another PhD candidate at the University of Edinburgh. Her name is Morgan Luddington, who is looking at female experiences in the outdoors, especially around periods. And so there is a kind of research foundation being built there as well, which is amazing. So yeah, I thought I'd just quickly mention that.
So this is a question for both of you. What advice would you give to teachers planning residential or activity trips, and how can they incorporate mobile technologies into their planning to benefit the students?
Yeah, I can maybe start off with on that
Mm.
one. So something that I saw kind of coming through quite prominently was actually the role of parents in all of this, and young people feeling like they need to keep in
Mm.
touch with parents. First of all, because of
Mm.
what we've already discussed around kind of feeling safe and comfortable. But I also saw some young people feeling a little bit of pressure to get in touch with parents, especially when phones were being left at home or left at the centre rather for
Yeah.
extended
Mm.
periods of time. So one of the kind of pieces of advice that I would have for any teacher thinking about doing this would be to bring parents along from the very outset and explain to them that actually there's going to be times where your young person isn't going to
Yeah.
be
Mm.
contactable, but I can guarantee you that they are
Mm.
absolutely safe. And I think actually kind of heading that off at the
Yes.
pass quite early is quite
Mm.
important.
Mm.
And it is. I mean, naturally, a parent is going to be
Yeah.
concerned about their young person going away for that period of time,
Yeah, of
but
course.
also a young person is going there to learn.
Mm.
And what I saw, at least, was that some young people did feel a little bit of pressure to be like, "Oh my goodness, I
Mm.
need to contact my
Mm.
mum. I need to speak to my dad
Yeah.
tonight. Otherwise, they'll worry about me." So
Mhm.
there was a little bit there, and also what I did see, and I have seen work quite well, is teachers posting on social media during the
Yes.
residential
Yeah.
trip.
Mm.
So being on Twitter and saying, day 3
Mm-hmm.
update, and there's
Yeah.
lots of photos and all these kinds of things, which is actually really nice, actually, in terms of when you get back to the school to then be able to show this to the young
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
and say, look what we were doing last
Yeah.
week. Do you remember this was day
Mhm.
3? And to kind of use that as a method of enhancing that transfer of learning and that development of
Mm.
memory. And I think that's where photographs and kind of taking a
Mm.
waterproof camera or something like that
Yeah.
could be really helpful. So yeah, the kind of parenting thing certainly, and then also sharing on kind of
Yeah.
social media, I think is two ways that can
Yeah.
help that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And definitely kind of, I think we find kind of working with all these different schools across the country, the better prepared the young people are for kind of
Mm.
what to expect, but also knowing that this residential is going to be a learning opportunity. It's not just a holiday where it's going to be easy all the time.
Mm.
And the more that they're prepared, the more that they
Yeah.
get from it. And it's schools that can um, make it part of kind of a longer term investment of kind of this happens at this key time in year 8, and we're going to
Mm.
build up to it, and afterwards we're going to really utilize that
Mm.
learning. And the more of that that happens, obviously within challenges of fitting everything into the
Yeah.
curriculum,
Yeah.
um, but it works. It then isn't just a standalone 5-day
Mm.
experience, and
Mm.
it is definitely a challenge of how you can transfer that learning back into the young
Yeah.
people's real worlds. But the more you can do that, then the young people will
Yeah.
remember the experience for
Mm.
going
Mm.
forward, and remember those skills that they drew upon to get to the top of
Yeah.
that mountain, or when they were
Mm.
scared, when they were standing um, at the bottom of a cliff face, having to rely on their friends to kind of belay them up and keep them safe. Um, and there's loads of brilliant resources that people can draw upon to kind of set
Mm.
up that learning and reuse it back when they get back into school. But it definitely is kind of the more that can be done, the
Yeah.
longer lasting effects. And it's yeah, it is a challenge to get right for sure.
Mm.
Mm.
It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from Beyond the Classroom with Marie and Jodie. There's not a lot they don't know about teaching.
We like to finish with 2 stars and a wish, which, if you don't know, a star is a positive idea or experience from this episode, and a wish is a wish. We all know what wishes are. Does anyone have a star they'd like to start with?
I think my star was definitely. I find it so fascinating hearing about what Jack found on the
Mm.
courses, and actually just totally coming from such a different lens to what I saw when I was instructing. And the link to kind of Stranger Things and
Mm.
Minecraft just becoming
Yeah.
the young people's real world, that they're so they see it as such a real thing, is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Lovely.
Nice, yeah, and I think mine was kind of maybe a bit broader, but kind of maybe building on Emily's piece there a little bit around young people actually bringing this set of knowledge to the outdoors is actually outdoor education as a method of broadening young people's horizons.
Yeah.
You know, very often, especially with the Minecraft and Netflix references, he was like, "Oh my goodness, these environments actually exist! I can't believe this." And we were canoeing, funnily enough, across Ullswater. I feel like we've discussed Ullswater a lot today.
Because Ullswater's heaven.
Yeah, exactly. And we were canoeing across, and this young person, almost under his breath, there was nobody listening, but I was sitting next to him, and he was looking out at the environment, and he just said, "I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe what I'm seeing." And it wasn't for the benefit of anybody else, but it was just for him. And I think really that would be the star point that I would take away is actually, just the power of educating in these environments. It just can't be replicated, I don't think.
Agreed.
Do we have a wish for outdoor education?
Oh my
I think
goodness.
mine gets really big, and kind of why the government should fund outdoor education for every young
that'd be
person.
great.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing it in Wales and Scotland. We're seeing that on the agenda, and hopefully
Amazing.
we'll get the same in England as well, because we know the power of outside.
Yeah.
Well, when I was thinking about this earlier, I did write down residential experiences to be compulsory for all young people in the UK. That was what I wrote down, and I did do a little bit of searching actually around what's happening in Scotland and Wales, and there's lots of exciting things. So in Scotland, they're currently looking at a residential outdoor education bill, which has been consulted on, and I think they had 535 responses, of which over 95% indicated they wanted residential outdoor education to be compulsory in Scotland. And in Wales, they're currently consulting on an outdoor education bill as well, looking at making residential outdoor education compulsory. So yeah, it's a wish, but it's also absolutely somewhere it's happening. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yes.
That's really good. So, thank you very much for listening, and thank you to our two guests. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And if you have any comments you wish to send to us, please send them to
beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk.
Thank you, Jodie. You're the expert.
This podcast is proudly produced by Beyond. Please bear in mind the views and opinions expressed are those of individuals and may not represent those of Beyond or Twinkle.